So, feel free. You can turn on your cameras. We can make this very conversational. Because I know usually, we say keep your cameras off, stay muted, since we're teaching a class. But this is just the office hour. So if you want to, you can feel free to do that. So, for those of you who haven't joined one of these sessions before, like I've explained it a couple times in class, it's really just an open forum. So, what this is here for is just for any of the observers or student teachers who are either about to start doing any of their student teaching. Maybe you've been observing some classes and you have questions about how teachers put things together or how we organize our lessons. Any question just related to ESL, becoming a teacher, teaching classes. That's what this is all about. So, without any further ado, I will let anyone feel free to either come on and ask a question out loud, or if you're somewhere where maybe you can't do video and sound, always feel free to type your question in the chat, and I will be monitoring that as well. So, with that, I see someone is typing. I always feel like in these situations when we're waiting for the text to come through, it's like waiting for the results of some game show or something like, okay, what's it gonna be? All right, so here we go. First question. Um, do you ever finish a lesson or activity earlier than expected? If so, what do you do? Um, Yes, that has happened. I would say it is more of an issue for my higher level or more advanced students because a lot of times when you're teaching more advanced students, even if you know their level, you might present a topic and they just really pick up on it very fast, or at least faster than you would have thought they would have picked up on. I haven't ran into that as much with my lower level students, only because usually just I guess maybe myself, I think it's a little bit easier to plan for the lower levels in that regard, because you always know that you could just kind of spend more time on something and make things last longer. So, techniques of what do I do? So, one thing that I try to always do, and this is just no matter the level, lower level or more advanced students, I plan my lesson, but then especially when it comes to production activities, I try to think of ways that I can extend them. And so this might be, I might think of these ahead of time, which could be like maybe additional questions that I may ask, or maybe if it's an activity where they're doing something, I'll think of, well, how can I part to this activity? If I have enough time, how could I use the exact same setup, the exact same activity, but maybe just change one small detail so that it's sort of something new? So that's one technique that I just do. It's not something I usually include on my lesson plan. It's just something that I have in the back of my mind if that were to happen. The other thing is that I really try to keep track as best I can throughout the lesson, because I find that that is a little bit easier than that's a little bit easier to kind of know where you're at with the lesson if you're keeping track throughout. So if one activity early on is really short, I still try to extend it. Or unless I know that something else later, I'll have more activities. And those extensions can be simple things like if you're asking students to respond to something, maybe asking a follow-up question, or maybe if you're like, let's say we're doing a worksheet as an activity and it has 10 questions. Well, then after I go through those 10 questions, if they have gotten all of those, maybe I will just form some new ones, like some extra sentences, or I'll make up something, or like an on the spot sort of question or a sentence that they can fill in a word, just to try to add little elements to the activity to make it a little bit longer. And Also, just calling students up. So if you're doing an activity where maybe it is like a simple response, like, okay, well, number two, what did you pick? A, B, C, or D? And they're just gonna say C. Maybe instead, you could actually have them read the question, read the answer. These types of things take the student a little bit longer, and you'd be surprised that even if it only takes 10 or 15 seconds longer, if you're doing that over the course of 10 or 15 questions, then you end up adding a couple of more minutes or 2 or 3 minutes. And if you're doing that sort of throughout and you're really ahead of time, then that will help. But definitely just trying to keep track as you're going through to not end up at the very end of class with 20 minutes left or with 15 minutes left. It's definitely easier to add small little things to each activity to make them the right amount than to try to come up with something to fill an entire 15-minute block at the end if you haven't had good time management throughout. So hopefully that answers your question or gives you some ideas. All right. Oh, Vicky, okay. How do you guide students to watch the video without subtitles or read the articles that there isn't a translation for ESL students? Okay. Yes, yes, yes. So this is a very good question, Vicky. And I think the answer depends. So sometimes I've run into this in two situations. One, and I think most recently, where it involves some of your students that I've been helping out with, where I probably should have just had them watch it with subtitles because it is such a more advanced level topic and the subtitles probably would have helped. So that will I'll chalk up to like one of my own mistakes and something that I could have done better. But there is a reason why we would want students to watch without subtitles because we know that there are different elements to learning language. So we have listening, we have reading, we have writing, speaking, and if the intention is to really focus on listening, then the subtitles being on actually turns it into more of a reading exercise because many people may be good at reading language or even writing, but definitely reading because they don't have to come up with the words themselves or recognize an accent. They can decipher what it means in front of them. And so sometimes that makes it the activity easier when you don't want it to be. So I would say if it's a situation where I want students to look at a video or listen to something without subtitles, then I will usually try to pre warn them that look, the point of this exercise is not that you're going to understand everything. Because there are going to be words you don't recognize. That's going to happen. But I try to focus their attention on exactly what I want them to listen for. So maybe it's a particular grammar topic. Like for instance, we're going over the conditionals in one of the classes this summer. And so maybe I'm showing them a video where someone is using the second conditional a lot, or that's the purpose of the video. So I'll focus their attention on listen for when you hear the second conditional. Not so much listen to the whole thing, like try to focus their attention so that they're learning how to pick words out of the conversation and not so much doing the whole thing. Now, on the other hand, you could also have a listening comprehension exercise where you want them to kind of listen to the whole thing. But even then, we can let our students know that, okay, you won't understand everything, but I want you to just listen overall for what is the general theme of what the video is saying. Not that you have to know every word, and you're not going to. And you might have a few sentences that you have no idea what the person said. But try to just grasp the general idea. And I think warning students that the idea is not for them to know everything that they're hearing helps them stick with it. Because I think sometimes students get discouraged if we give an assignment and we're like, okay, listen to this and answer these questions. They think, oh, I'm supposed to know this all. I'm supposed to know what all this says, and I don't. So they get discouraged and they just turn it off or they just don't pay attention. So I think letting them know ahead of time that you're not expected to know everything and what the purpose of the assignment is, that helps.
So that is for higher level student. But what about the lower level student? If they refuse to learn any English, they don't want to watch the video because they think that they don't know the content of the video. So how do you guide those lower students?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think what I would do, this hasn't happened to me too much yet, but I know that it will. um, I think what I would try to do is definitely selecting videos that my students may be more interested in. And so I think that it becomes really important on the subject matter of the video. This is difficult because there may not be a video out there that perfectly fits what you're trying to teach, but definitely for the students who are less motivated or they just are like, I just don't want to do this, I'm not into this, trying to find something that really fits their interests. So if we know that like they're into sports or like PE or things like that, trying to get videos that also are part of their interests so that at the very least they'll have fun watching the visuals of the video, and hopefully they'll still just by as a bonus of watching, they'll still be hearing the language and hopefully will pull some meanings out of that. But I think that that's when for the lower levels or younger students or even older students that are a lower level, getting something that's really their interest. And I think that this even is true for adults because recently I actually experienced this where I had an adult student that I was tutoring, and we were going over a particular grammar part, our grammar function, but I used a conversation topic because the Britney Spears Conservatory was happening, and it kind of went along with what we were talking about. So I tried to use that as a conversation topic, but my student really was just not interested in that, and that wasn't something that he really cared about. And so it made it a little bit more difficult to get that conversation rolling and to be as effective with the activity. So I think that's why it's really important to try to know our students' interests. Because in that case, if I would have found a different topic that could cover that same area, it probably would have been a lot better, and it would have been a lot more effective, my activity.
Mhm. Sorry, one more questions.
Yeah.
So during the video, will you stop the video and explain the meaning, explain the content for students? Did you suggest do that?
Yeah, so you can do that, or that's one way that you can do it. If you know that there are times when you might need to explain something, I've done it that way too. Or you can try to pre-teach some of the vocabulary or some of the things that they will hear. So I think I would prefer just in general pre-teaching some of the really important vocabulary that they may not know. So, for instance, in the example of your students that we were talking about, for the observers who may not have seen this, our topic was we're going over making an argument and the different parts to having an argument. And the topic was, should college athletes get paid? Because the students are interested in sports, and so I thought that was an interesting topic for them. But the video that I had them watch, it was a little bit fast, just the rate of speech. But then also they were talking about things like this congressperson did this, or there was a bill for this, or the NCAA this. And so there was a lot of different things that they probably didn't know. And so pre-teaching some of those items that I know are important for understanding what the video is talking about, but maybe aren't exactly what we've been covering in class, that'll help them know those things up front. And then when they hear them, it doesn't throw them off because now they've already been introduced to it before.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So in every county or city, there will be a group of senior teachers who are helping all the English teachers in their area improve their teaching skills. And Vicky is working with this group in Jai City. So I think teachers, English teachers, will benefit by like attending your office hour if they have time. So is Friday the day that you guys meet regularly together to discuss teaching strategy or like share resources with teachers in Jai City? Is Friday the day?
Uh, yeah, enjoy Friday is the meeting, English meeting time. Yeah,
And how many members are there in your group?
it depends on the school. Each school maybe about 5 to 8. If the school is big, maybe 10
Oh,
or
I see. So on Friday, each school their English teachers will get together,
yeah.
have some discussions.
It depends on if we have a workshop. If we will have workshop, each school will assign some student as teachers to go to our school. Then we will have time to discuss it. But if I say the GRE counselor, this group only 4 students, only 4 teachers, me, Lily, and Dory, 3 or 4, yeah, 4. Yeah,
Mm,
only 4 teachers join this group.
oh, and so for example, in Zhanghua, I used to attend meetings like this. So we select a group of senior teachers, 辅导团,
Yeah,
and then they travel to many different schools
yes.
and see English teachers in class and give them advice and share opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also do the same?
Yes.
Okay, I see. So you can invite English teachers to join Quentin's office hour next time if
Okay.
they're interested, because I think we can learn a lot by exchanging opinions. Yeah. So this is our third one, right?
Hmm.
Third. Yeah. And I'm hoping that more people will know the service. And so this is my question for you.
Yeah.
Uh, and also, it's very good for observers because I know Asian market is a big one, and a lot of observers will probably have the opportunity to teach Asian students. And Asian students tend to be more quiet, and it's very hard to get them to talk. And last time I used my example, my story to explain how important it is to work with quiet students. So how do you get an extremely quiet student to talk? And it's very often you will probably teach a group of very quiet students. That's very typical of Asian students. And it can be very awkward online, especially online. Nobody wants to talk and they just stay silent for a long
Hmm.
time. And this is something that a lot of observers may have to deal with in the future. And I wonder what strategies you have for new teachers.
Yeah, this one is very difficult. Definitely. And I think we touched on a little bit when you brought that scenario last time and why it's so important to call on students, which is maybe very unnatural to American teachers, at least at the beginning, because usually speaking, most in American kind of educational culture, you'll ask a question, allow the students to kind of think about it, and then wait for volunteers to raise their hand and give you an answer. And then maybe on certain questions, if you don't get volunteers, you may start calling on people. But in general, you just wait for volunteers, people answer. That doesn't always happen in these cases or with very shy students. And so I guess one thing is just to try to call on students and to make sure that you're calling on, if you can. I mean, of course, if you have a class of 30 students and you're teaching online, it may be difficult to call on every single student, but trying to get a mix of students. But I guess the other part of this is how do we start changing behavior, maybe, and how do we influence our students to maybe participate more? And for me, my perspective is always to make it a very safe place for students to feel comfortable sharing. And so I always try to give a lot of encouragement when a student shares, whether they say every word right or, I will obviously, correct their mistakes, or tell them a better way they could have said it. But I always try to be very encouraging so that students feel comfortable putting themselves out there and making a mistake. I think that's why a lot of students have a fear of sharing, especially if they're shy because they don't want to say the wrong thing, or maybe they're embarrassed about the way they might pronounce a word. And so I try to create a very safe environment for that. Also, some things that you can do also in the beginning of your class. So let's say you're having like maybe a 4 week session. So you're going to be with the same students for a while. Maybe start off by giving them a homework assignment or an assignment even at the beginning of class where they have to answer questions or they have to just fill in one word of a sentence, kind of like a fill in the blank exercise, and then just have them read those sentences. Or if they do it for homework, maybe if they get a chance, because right now, if you're turning in homework online, maybe you can grade the homework before class, and then you correct it. You show them what they did wrong, correct the sentences, and then have them share in class, because then it takes the pressure off of, oh my gosh, am I going to say the right or wrong thing? They already know that they have the right answer available to them, and then it's just a matter of saying it. And hopefully the aim is if they get more comfortable just saying things that they already know are correct, they will become more comfortable with taking a chance when they have to create a sentence or say a sentence that isn't already written for them, even if they might make a mistake. So it's all about just building that confidence, I think, over time. And you do that, by being warm and welcoming, and trying not to be over critical, I think, and giving praise, and so that they know that we know it's tough. Because I think about what the students do, and I think about me at that age, and how comfortable I would be not only just answering a question in front of the class, but also answering it online in front of observers. And I was doing it in my native language. Then trying to do that in a language that you're not familiar with, it's a lot. And so that's why I just try to be as supportive as possible in that.
Thank you. Okay, Vicky.
Can I ask one more question?
Hmm.
Because right now we are online teaching next week, and in your class there are just 5 or 6 students. But next week we were going to meet 20, 25 students online learning. So how do you know that they really understand what you are teaching? How do you observe or you get understanding what they are in class? Yeah, how do you know that? How do you improve their English ability? Yeah, because we know that student online learning, the efficiencies decrease, not very good. So how do you do that? Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that's a great question, Vicky. And um, I have only so I'm kind of the opposite. I've only taught online, and I haven't really gotten the in-person classroom experience. So I think what I use to kind of test and see if my students are grasping things is really just in not only in person, or not in person, but in face to face through the online medium that you're using. That's where I really try to test things, like make it more speaking and listening focused. And so that will be where I will try to test students on saying sentences, or especially like the grammar points or sentence structures that we're working on, seeing if they can form those sentences in in a speaking engagement, or using that language, or showing videos, or speaking questions and responses to the students in person. And then I think it's a little bit easier to test reading and writing, even though with the writing sometimes you don't know if how much help they had at home. Maybe they typed it all into Google Translate and then just plopped it on the paper. That's something, with online, and it's hard to test that. But some of the other resources that we have now that are available to us, like maybe using a whiteboard or Jamboard, are ideas where you can see live writing so that you can have students do things in real time to see how they do it. And if you break them up into small groups, because that would be also unmanageable if you were trying to watch 20 students all writing things on a board. But maybe if you break them down into smaller groups and have them type responses to things in a live setting, you can then test their actual written proficiency versus giving them time to do homework and think about their responses and write the sentence, correct the sentence, and all of that before they turn it in. Um, and so I think those would be the things that I would try to do most, is just using some of those tools like a whiteboard, Jamboard, and then the activities I do during class to see if to test them on their proficiency. And I think, in this online environment, we try the best that we can, I think, to adapt. But there are a lot of things in that in-person learning environment that can't be easily duplicated or replicated, I guess, in an online environment. So it is difficult. I'd be actually curious, Luke, since you've been teaching too. Have you had any big experiences with things that maybe you found very helpful for switching to an online environment from in person? Any other tips or tricks? Because I'm interested too, since I haven't had the other side, only online.
I think since May, a lot of teachers have experienced difficulty teaching online. And I started this program more than 10 years ago. I traveled to more than 100 schools to say, this is the trend. You should learn something about online teaching because this is the trend. And not many people are interested. And so, a lot of teachers have trouble with technical issues. And they did not have enough online resources to assist them with. So I think like a lot of people just try to learn this within these 2 months, try to improve their knowledge about technology. But it's good because then they will try to reflect on their own ability and try to work on their weaknesses because you never know. You never know if you can students can go back to school in the next school year in September. Because if our cases go up again, then students will have to stay home learning online. And I think it, teachers have to spend more time, like because in at school, it's just students go to the class, and after the class is dismissed, and then it's easier because you can grade their papers, you can correct their homework, but it's so hard to do this online. And also you have to show your students how you can do homework online, so it takes time. And so in this transition period, both teachers and students have to learn more about how to work together online, how to even after class, teachers have to work more hours because they have to go to their Google Classroom and to try to open every document, and then they have to type. Some people don't like to type or correct papers online. They would prefer to use a red pen, and it's easier, faster. But you have to get used to it. So I would say there's no shortcuts. uh, while teachers are learning something new themselves, they also have to encourage students to learn with them. And it depends on your attitude, because if teachers say, "Oh, complain, like when can we go back to school?" and this government is just doing a lousy job, and with that kind of attitude, students will feel that your anger, and they also don't want to learn new things with you. But if you have a very positive attitude, "Oh yeah, I don't know how to do this either, but maybe we can help each other out. If you seen something useful online, you let me know. And I'm a teacher, but I'm also a student, I'm learning. And so uh, I would say it takes time. I started to do online teaching 11 years ago, and I really wanted to help teachers in our county. We have more than 200 public schools in Zhanghua County. It's a huge area, and uh, but people in Mandarin we say you do not cry until you see your own grave or casket. That means they don't want to learn this until they have to. Like the pandemic hit, and they have no choice but to learn more about different platforms. They have to learn like Google Meet, how to use Google Meet, how to record a Google Meet session, personal account, educator's account, different domain names, have trouble joining each other's class, all kinds of technical issues. And Zoom, Skype, or Line. In Taiwan, we use Line a lot, and Microsoft Teams. They just have to explore all platform and all kinds of possibilities. Each school is different. So,
Hmm.
and also students go to 补习班, like we call cram school or private language schools after school. So, and they students may have to use another platform to learn English. It's so confusing. And but I always look at things in a positive way. I say, oh, we can learn more if we have to use different platforms, because then you can work with different people, not just one platform and a certain, like a group of people. Yeah. So my conclusion is teachers had to come to the office hour and share resources. And, because for example, I told you World War is good, and then you are starting to use it. But also other teachers share so many resources with me, and how they grade their students' homework online, by creating a virtual classroom. So all kinds of things take time to learn, and but we should be happy about doing this. And this I will add one more thing to the topic we just dwelt on. That is how to deal with extremely quiet students. And also, like you say, it's time to change your behavior. If your students are so quiet, instead of getting upset, frustrated, you should be have more smiles on your face, and make them feel more comfortable going to your class. So a teacher's attitude, a teacher's mentality is very important. And if you get upset about students' inaction or their hesitance to answer your questions, then maybe you should do more, and you should encourage them more instead of getting upset, because it's if you do that, it's a vicious cycle. You get upset and students are afraid, and then you get even more upset and the students don't want to answer any questions anymore. I saw that a lot. I saw that a lot. So I mean, it's just not your teaching skills. It's also about your personality. If you are a pessimistic person, then you will make a great teacher. Because I like your personality because you are always smiling, outgoing, and even though nobody enjoy your class, you can still like be very happy. I'm
Yeah,
teasing.
very
I'm
enjoy
teasing you.
yourself.
I'm teasing you. And you are not affected by students' facial expressions. You can just keep smiling, talking to them. That's what teachers have to learn from you. Um, yeah, I admire you for that. I hope I answer your question.
Oh, let's see. So Hannah says, what are some of your favorite activities or games that you think are most effective in terms of getting students excited and grasping onto material? Well, in the online environment, I've tried a few different things, and I think it always depends on your age level of your students as well, and exactly kind of where they are in that. Of course, with the younger ones, things that are more game like or that are kind of more fun in that way are very helpful. And so. Let's see, some of my favorite ones, like well, Luke mentioned, and I've become a very big fan of now, is word wall, just because you can do so many things with it. That's one of my go-tos. I think Hannah, you may have been on a call before, and I mentioned that, but that's one of my go-tos for really having fun, exciting things to do. Some of the other things I've done in class as well as activities are I've done I've actually done a Jeopardy game. Now the thing with Jeopardy, any type of competition, let me say that. Any type of competition type of game where you can either maybe try to do small groups or if everyone's individual, where it's sort of like a team or a competitive part, that won't work for every situation, but I've found that in a lot of teaching scenarios, the kids get really excited when they're like trying to win or trying to accomplish a goal with their team. And so that's a way to be excited and motivated. And then a big one is just once you get to know your students, this isn't something that you maybe can do from day one. And I definitely understand that. This is not maybe a day one thing. But as you get to know your students, trying to do activities or even subject matters that they're interested in and turning that into your lesson. So, for instance, Vicky told me that the school that she's with and the students that I'm working with, they like sports, PE. That so the first kind of way that I started the course was with that topic of should college athletes get paid? Because I thought it's something that we can create an argument about almost anything, but that was a very relevant thing happening now. And it's something that since they're in high, going into getting ready to start thinking about college, they can think about, oh, well, if I was an athlete, should I be getting paid for what I'm doing? Like it just was an easy, relatable topic. And I think that that helps them get a little bit more excited, especially when it comes to doing homework or asking questions about things if they're already into the material. So I think just and then also one last thing I will say is just mixing your approaches. So if you tend to do maybe a lot of worksheets, then maybe trying to switch up the activities to maybe a listening and respond, or maybe a game, or just trying to have variation. I think is also important, so that the students don't get kind of used to like a kind of a one trick situation where you're just sort of doing the same kind of activities every time. So just trying to have some variation in there between using videos, maybe using audio clips, doing games, and then having maybe more of the actual written things. I do think that, just one last note on that, that is a challenge of the online environment. And I would say it's still something that I work very hard to do too, because online is limiting in the types of activities you can do. Because I know that even when I was going through the certification program, and even thinking about activities that maybe I really liked in school, those are hard to do online. It's hard to do group activities online. It's hard to do like where you can put students in different groups and they work together. These things are hard to do in an online environment, unless you, depending on which services you're using. I know some things like a Zoom maybe has like the breakout rooms where you can put people into groups and things. So maybe sometimes you can, but depending on what platform you're using, some activities are difficult to do online. So just really finding what could work as far as trying different things, seeing how your students react to them, and then just kind of taking that feedback. If you know that a type of activity really didn't go over very well, maybe your students aren't the competitive type. Maybe they don't get into, I need to win this. Okay, well then maybe we don't turn everything into a competition, because you'll lose them in that. So just being that adaptable, and trying, and then if it works, if it doesn't, adapting that. For good audio material, strictly audio material, um is harder to come by, but I will say linguahouse.com. I wrote them down this time. Linguahouse.com. That one has a lot of lesson plans that include an audio clip. And they don't have as many free resources. A lot of their content are ones that you have to have a subscription or an account to, but there are a good amount of free ones too. So a lot of their lesson plans will have an audio clip. And then also, if you're using an audio clip during class, any video that you get on YouTube can be an audio clip. Just, minimize the window, so that you don't show the video. So you can turn any YouTube video into an audio clip as well, if you find ones that you like. So I know that that one's one that seems very obvious, but you don't think about it. You're like, oh, I'm looking on YouTube for a video, but you can make any of those audio just by minimizing, or putting if you're sharing your screen, just moving it or covering it up with something else, so that all they can do is hear. Hmm. Oh, imagine what you. Um, This one, I must say, Hannah, I don't have a tip or trick necessarily. This is just probably, and I'm just going to be honest, this is what I spend the most of my lesson planning doing. Um, the lesson planning piece really usually isn't too much to actually think about how I want to deliver, for me personally, how I want to deliver a topic, or once I go through, and as I'm going through my lesson, how I want to explain things. That's not usually the part that's time intensive. It's finding all of the materials that I want to use, because you'll want to teach simple past, and you know that your students were just covering, certain types of verbs. So you want to find something that matches those verbs that they've already been learning. But this is where and I don't know if you which office hours I mentioned this on, but I guess I do have a trick because one thing that I've started doing that time has told that I've learned over time is that I definitely search for my materials first before building out my entire lesson plan. So I will say, okay, I'm teaching the second conditional. What materials should I look for in the second conditional? Let's try to find a video. Let's try to find a worksheet. Let me try to create this presentation. What do I want to put in my presentation? I'll start there and then work backwards and build my lesson plan around what I'm going to use because then you know what words you need to teach. In the example with that Vicky brought up, I know that if I'm going to use this video, that means I need to pre-teach the vocabulary. So then that goes into my lesson plan. And so starting off with your materials first and then working backwards to build your lesson plan is a way to save time. But as far as just like searching, yeah, Google, YouTube, search, and go to town. That's all I do, really.
Yeah. Can I add something? Yeah. So it's 1 year since I started to work with Quentin. Uh, so when we got started, I always asked him to come up with a lesson plan. And so I asked him how long it took to finish a lesson plan. And our class length is 40 minutes. But in order to have this lesson plan, it always took him about 90 minutes or 2 hours.
Yeah,
So
2 hours, I would say. Yeah.
a lot of time, like you come up with some ideas, you jot them down, you start to look for resources, and you start to develop your lesson plan. It's very time consuming. So I say, it will get shorter and shorter, 2 hours, maybe 1 hour in 3 months, and then 30 minutes. And once you have so many lesson plans, you can put them into different categories. You can put your resources into different categories. So you need to sort them out, and maybe in a few years, when you are teaching conditional clauses, then I did that before, and then you type conditional, and then all your materials are there. So it just takes time, and but if you have a plan, and if you can put your materials and save them in a safe place, and then in the future, it takes much shorter time to prepare for your lesson, yeah,
Hmm.
for your class, yeah.
I must say, Luke definitely. I don't think I've gotten mine down to 30 minutes just yet. A year later, still probably at about the hour and a half range, but we're getting there. We're getting there. The other thing, another tip that I would say too with that is be organized with where you save your materials. This is one little pro tip that I've already experienced. When I first started making lesson plans with Luke, I would save them in folders in my Google Drive based on the date. So I would just say, oh, 6/9/20, 6/9/20, or October 5th. I have no idea what's in the October 5th folder. So now I've definitely started filing things based on topics. So I will put the date just because I know when that class is happening, but I will put now like July 29th, second conditional, October 5th, simple past tense, just so that then when I go back to try to find them, it's much easier. Ooh, very good question. Class management. Wow. Yeah. This one is a tough one, and I hate to say that maybe some of it is a little bit of experience as you start to go through things. Your class management maybe gets better. But I tell you, what I always do is, and I will say that this is my golden rule, especially when I was first starting. When you're first starting, I don't think it's as easy to come up with things off the top of your head. I just think it's very difficult to think of things spontaneously. It's even difficult to think of good examples of things. I still struggle with that sometimes if I don't already have my examples written down. You'd be surprised when you're trying to think of, oh, what's an example of a first conditional sentence? You're like, oh, I can't think of anything to say. So that's harder to do as a new teacher. So what I would say is, as a new teacher, planning is your best friend, and really try to put those time amounts on each activity that you think it will take. So really doing that. I know sometimes it's easy to kind of not get lazy, but just think, oh, okay, I know I have a 40-minute class. I'll put a few things down and I won't actually clock them out. But I'll tell you the amount of times where I will put those times and then I'm like, oh wait, this is probably not going to take, like I've put the times and then I'm looking and I see that I still have 20 minutes of class left. And I'm like, well, this last activity is not going to take 20 minutes. And so just really putting those times on every activity will help you get an idea of where you are. Then, secondly, over plan. I would say your best friend as a new teacher is to plan more than you think you will need. If you go through a lesson plan and you think that, okay, I have enough to get to 40 minutes, plan for an extra activity that might be like a 10-minute something. Plan more, or plan for either two ways. Either plan more, as in more activities, or underestimate how long something will take. So instead of saying something will take 15 minutes, say, well, I better just put 10, because just in case, because where you will go wrong more often is that your time is too short. And if your time is too short, then it's hard to come up with things on the fly as a new teacher. But if your time goes too long, then that's an easier situation to deal with, because you could always continue the lesson next class. You could always say, okay, we covered the majority of this, and I think the students understood, so I'm just going to move on to something new next class. You have more options of what you can do if you go overtime than under time. It's much easier to just do something next class. And I always think about it this way: if I overplan a lesson and I have to do some of it next class, that just saved me time of planning my next class. Now I'm already ahead of the game for my next class of planning. So I think that that is what I would say is the biggest tip that I can give to new teachers. And then as you kind of get in there and you start doing it, I think you get a little bit better at it, or at least you become better at recognizing which types of activities typically run long or typically run short. So some that I've come up with. Um, this is especially for lower level students. Any type of activity where I'm going to ask a question and I expect the students to create a response and answer me. They're not just reading something, they're going to actually craft a response in their head and tell it to me. Those activities always take longer than what I plan for. And no matter what I'll say, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. It always takes 13. Like, it just, those types of activities always take a while because the students have to think, the students have to respond, I have to correct. If they say something incorrectly, I have to correct them, have them repeat it again. So those types of activities tend to run long. Whereas an activity, let's say you're doing an activity where you want them to watch a video and then answer some questions or something like that, those, even though you know how long the video is, those can sometimes go really short because if the students are just really good and they watch the video and they answer all the questions very fast, now it like you thought it was going to take 10 minutes, but the students just were they didn't have a problem. They were able to just easily do it. And so those are the so you kind of start to learn yourself and you learn the students, but then you also learn your own tendencies. Like I kind of have an idea now since I've been lesson planning for a year. I have more of an idea of what estimations I'm not good at or what types of activities I always get the timing wrong for, and then I try to adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
And so, Vicky, are you also talking about like discipline students or mainly time management?
Yes, the new foreign teacher also met like the disciplined student, and they don't know how to deal with it. So they will ask our like we a co-teacher to help her to do that. But we help her one time, two time. After three times, the student out of control.
Yeah, I see. So I went with the time management. Yeah, you did just say classroom management in general. My apologies. So, oh yeah, behavioral issues. So I think now is your co-teacher usually in person with you, or is it like we do in co-teaching where one's online and then you're the in-person?
Yeah,
Uh,
in person, in person.
oh,
Yeah.
I
Sometimes
see.
we will take the student away from the classroom. Yeah, then he interrupt the class. Yeah. So sometimes we will do that. But that is the good idea because if we take him away from the classroom, that means he doesn't learn everything, doesn't learn anything. Yeah. So that is why we want to, yeah. This is a problem, a big problem that when we meet the new foreign teacher, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely understand. Maybe, well, maybe you have some, because I tell you, and this, I'm going to be honest. Maybe I've been fortunate, especially in an online environment. So typically, when I've co-taught with Luke, for instance, he's there in person and I'm online. So those types of issues are typically Luke takes over, or the teacher
Yeah,
in the
we
classroom takes over
let
because I'm
let's
not there.
let's talk about this next week. And
Okay.
so, you have a webinar, and you can tell people. Oh, could you copy and paste your webinar information here? I'm going
Oh,
to have
yeah.
to leave soon because I will have to assist Emily with her class. And so next time, let's talk about how to discipline students in the classroom. And you know, when students are studying online at home, it's easier because if you have students get together, people talk to each other, and they start to play tricks on other students, and then oh, it's very noisy, and they don't pay attention. They try to have fun with their friends, you know. So if they have to study individually online, it's harder for them to create a trouble. Yeah, so that's another advantage of online teaching. Okay, I got to go. And please copy and paste your office hour time in the chat box and also the information about webinar in August. Okay?
Okay. Yep. I will. I'm getting that now, and I will post it in the chat, everyone.
All right, all right. Take your time.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.